I'm Geraldo Rivera.
I'm Emily Campagno.
And I'm Eric Shawn. This is a Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020. I'm Jessica Rosenthal. American cities are reeling from police shootings, protests, violence, and a debate over supporting law and order or supporting protesters.
I think it's going to lead to our ruin as a country if we don't have some law and order again.
I'm Dave Anthony. Millions of Americans might get a pay raise this week, but there's a catch. The tax cut, in quotes, might have to be paid back next year.
They would need lawmakers in Congress to come to a deal on a bill and put that bill forward in order to make these payroll tax deferrals permanent.
And I'm Jimmy Fallon. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
President Trump traveled to Kenosha, Wisconsin to see the damage, meet with small business owners and law enforcement following the police shooting of Jacob Blake. During protests of that incident, a teenager shot 3 demonstrators, killing 2 of them. President Trump said despite the damage in Kenosha, law enforcement got the upper hand, unlike they have, he says, in other cities.
Violent mobs demolished or damaged at least 25 businesses, burned down public buildings, and threw bricks at police officers, which your police officers won't stand for, and they didn't stand for it. These are not acts of peaceful protest, but really domestic terror.
The president said he coordinated to send in federal law enforcement, and if other cities accepted similar help and pressure, things would calm down. While Wisconsin's governor activated the National Guard, he declined the president's offer of Homeland Security agents, but did later accept additional federal support from the FBI and U.S. Marshals. One car dealership alone says it sustained $1.5 million in damage in Kenosha. Ricky Talapetra told the president he's been able to save 2 of his downtown businesses, but says he also represents the Downtown Kenosha Incorporated organization.
But right now, what we need is financial support. Loss of business and loss of property is staggering at this point.
The president said he would be giving $4 million to small businesses in the town and $1 million to law enforcement in the area.
I think we need law and order. I think the fact that our cities, many of our major cities, are on fire and that there's looting and marauding and rioting in the streets, I think is a real problem for the country.
Rand Paul is a Republican senator for Kentucky.
I think it's important to note that the majority of these cities are run by Democrat mayors, governors that are Democrats. Democrats have run these cities for 50 years, and basically they're a disaster. Chicago's a killing zone. Portland is on fire. So I think the president being there and lending moral support is a good idea. As far as money, we don't have any money in Washington. We're basically printing it up and borrowing it as fast as they can possibly do it. And there are ramifications to spending money you don't have. So as far as offering money, don't know about that, but I do appreciate the president offering moral support and also supporting law enforcement, because I think it's a tough time to be in law enforcement. It's difficult to try to corral, wild people, lawless people that are roaming the streets. But if we don't, I think it's going to lead to our ruin as a country if we don't have some law and order again.
Senator, tell me, because I was reading an op-ed you wrote earlier this summer about demilitarizing the police. I think that was in the headline. And you had said, I think it was in July, you weren't necessarily such a huge fan of the notion of sending in federal law enforcement into cities like Chicago and Portland. Have you shifted given what's happened over the past couple of months, or are you still there?
I think the best law enforcement is local. I do feel sorry for these people in these cities run by Democrat mayors who aren't doing anything. I mean, to call rioting and burning the courthouse, a summer of love like the mayor in Seattle did, to let people occupy, huge blocks. There is a role for the federal government to protect federal buildings, and there's also a role for the National Guard, but it has to be typically called out by the governor. So it's been rare in our country, and I think it's fortunately rare that we actually have troops in our cities, and I don't want to see that again. I think George Bush, the first George Bush, did call troops out during the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. So I think it has been done in the past.
Yeah.
But my preference would be that law enforcement be done at a local level, and that's still my preference. But I think there is a role when there's pandemonium and in a completely lawless state to have a superior show of force, such as the National Guard and putting down a riot. I think, frankly, in Louisville, when the decision is made on whether or not There'll be prosecution of the police that were involved with Breonna Taylor. There's already threats of violence. People are talking about burning the city down. And I don't want to see, Louisville's the biggest city in Kentucky. I don't want to see it burn like Portland and Minneapolis and all the others. And so the best way to do that is to have a large show of force, and hopefully you don't have to use the force, but a show of force can be a deterrence. And so I am for the National Guard preemptively getting involved and being available and being on every corner when that is called out, because I do think that if we don't, the threats of burning Louisville are very real.
Interesting. So you have more personal fears now, right? I want to talk to you about how you were attacked as you left the RNC last week. As scary as the video was to watch, I personally I got chills, really, when I heard that you were in your hotel room and you could hear people talking about where you were. And it made you realize that there were protesters looking for you from inside your hotel room? Is that the case?
Yeah, we did a great deal to try to avoid getting in this melee. We went to the exit, and the Secret Service told us, and we could see the mayhem. We could see large mobs of people chasing people down just outside the White House gates. It was just horrendous. So we took a bus with a police escort to the Trump Hotel, which is farther away than our hotel was, but we still had to somehow get back to our hotel. We then took an Uber, but the police had blocked the streets, and so the Uber couldn't get us. They got us 2 blocks from our hotel, but 2 big city blocks. And as we made it past most of the first block, we got a few jeers, nothing significant. But then someone said, hey, we've got Rand Paul trapped, and they all descended on us. I mean, it was like the sewers were emptying. Everybody from everywhere came around us. And we had literally probably 100 people or more surrounding us, pushing in on us. And we'd fortunately found 2 policemen. And the 2 policemen, were very brave, but they were outnumbered, 50 to 1. And so we were very, very concerned throughout the entire ordeal. Even when more police came, we were concerned that the police could be overrun. So, yeah, this has got to stop.
Senator, one of the things that was shouted at you as you left the RNC was "say her name." And we've heard protesters make that demand many times. It's a reference to demanding that law enforcement and others say the names of black people who've died at the hands of police. And I guess, and it's been pointed out, these protesters didn't know, not only have you actually spoken with Breonna Taylor's family, but you introduced the Justice for Breonna Taylor Act. And your statement says this is meant to prohibit no-knock warrants moving forward. Where is that? I know you just introduced that this summer.
Yeah, we introduced it after talking with her family, but I've been an opponent of no-knock raids for as long as I've been in public office. And so we have talked about criminal justice reform. I'm a co-sponsor and author with Democrat co-sponsors on 24 criminal justice bills. So I've been very active in this space. And that's the irony of these people who are really intent just on violence. They have no clue and don't care about actually changing politics. And if they did, would they be yelling at people instead of registering people to vote? If they cared about, our country and wanted to be a better place, they would have a voting registration table and sign people up to vote, and then they would try to appeal to the Congress, but they wouldn't try to corner people in Congress and threaten them and, terrorize people. But, yeah, the Breonna Taylor Act is something that it would end the no-knock raids and might have prevented the tragedy from happening. But these people have no idea, and so the bill we have introduced, it'll be sent to a committee. It's likely been sent to a committee, and we introduced it at the time when we were discussing police reform in general. We also introduced it as an amendment to the Republican bill that the Democrats refused to hear, which is also sort of a problem. I wasn't particularly in love with the Republican bill. I thought it could have been better, but I voted to get on it so we could try to amend it. Every Democrat voted no because, frankly, they like all this chaos, and they would rather this be their campaign. But I think Joe Biden and I think also Kamala Harris, they need to denounce these people. This is their base. These marauding people in our streets are all supporters of Joe Biden.
He did. I mean, I think he in his mind, at least, I think if we were to ask him, he would say he pretty forcefully denounced violence on Tuesday. And I think if you were to talk to some of these anarchist types, I mean, I don't know about you. I've talked to some of these anarchist types over the years. They don't support any politician. They support just burning it all down. I don't know if they would say they support Joe Biden. Do you?
No, absolutely they would. Who do you think the organizers of Black Lives Matter support? They support Joe Biden. They hate Donald Trump with a passion, and they do support Joe Biden. So the thing is he could easily renounce the support of any of the people involved with this. But he won't, because Black Lives Matter is a constituent group, a part of the base of Joe Biden. And I frankly think that he won't, because I think he actually supports what they're doing.
Do you think the officers in the shooting of Breonna Taylor should be arrested? I mean, what do you think should happen to them?
I think that, that'll have to be worked out by people who know all the details of the case. And I don't know. So frankly, I think it's going to be decided by the Attorney General of Kentucky, right, who has seen all the police reports and all that. And I think it's wrong of anybody to make a judgment as serious as that, not knowing the information. So someone would have to know the information. I do think that the most important thing is the policy, and the policy can put good people in a bad position. So let's say you're a brand new policeman on the force, and you're told to go break down a door at 2 a.m. They shout police, but breaking someone's door down, people on the other side are startled. And the people on the other side usually are drug dealers. And in this case, apparently everybody involved in this is involved with the drug trade somehow. But when they did break the door down, someone shoots and the police shoot back. So really the problem is putting police in this position and putting people in this position. And the best way to save lives is just not to do no-knock raids. And so that's what my bill does. And it doesn't get involved with the specifics of this case, because I frankly just don't know, enough of the specifics to make that decision.
Finally, Senator, we've talked a lot about, police and police reform and the violent protests. And I'm wondering, do you think President Trump should do something different than what he's been doing in order to calm things? We've heard Mr. Biden say that he adds fuel to every fire and that things would be much safer with him, and that the president's just blaming Democrat mayors for the violence and destruction. Meanwhile, this is all happening, under a President Trump administration. Do you think President Trump should do anything differently?
Crime, including murder, rape, and all of these things, are under the jurisdiction of state and local officials. The president has really nothing to do with crime. And so when you look at these cities, what you find is the top 10 cities with the highest murder rate per capita are all Democrats. If you look at the cities that have had the major problems, Chicago, Portland, Minneapolis, Louisville in our state, all run by Democrats for 50 solid years, not one Republican. So it's kind of hard to say it has anything to do with Republicans or Donald Trump. And everybody wants to say, oh, yeah, the people that are coming in the restaurant and attacking you and your wife and taking your food, throwing your food on the floor, and physically preventing you from moving, that's Donald Trump's fault. Well, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because how is it the fault of somebody who says what he wants to do for the country, and then the other side reacts in violence? The violence going on in our cities is all coming from the left.
Senator Rand Paul, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
This is Jimmy Fallon with your Fox News commentary coming up.
The coronavirus put the economy in recession, prompting Congress to spend $3 trillion. Most Americans got direct payments. Many small businesses got loans they don't have to pay back, and millions of people out of work got extra unemployment money. But that dried up, and then came gridlock. And when lawmakers couldn't agree on more financial aid, President Trump said he was fed up.
Therefore, I'm taking executive action.
He signed an order August 8th.
We're going to save American jobs and provide relief to the American workers.
He offered more extended unemployment and a way for a lot of Americans to bring home more pay from work by cutting a tax, the payroll tax. And starting this week, companies across America are allowed to start doing that. It's something that Democrats and some Republicans disagree with, saying it only helps people who have jobs, and millions don't right now. Another criticism, it's not really a tax cut.
Correct. So this is a tax deferral is what it is.
Edward Lawrence is a Fox business correspondent.
The government, the IRS collects 12.4% from everybody for Social Security. Now, half of that is paid by your work, half is paid by the employee, 2.9% for Medicare. half again paid by work, half by the employee. This focuses on the Social Security payment that's made and basically takes the worker's portion of that, which is half, 6.2%, and says you can defer that. You don't have to take that out of your paycheck today. You can defer that. Now, the payments will have to be paid back from January through April, and that's sort of the rub in a lot of this and why some companies are not opting in to do this, and companies would have to opt in to get this done.
Right. So this is up to companies whether or not they want to let their employees take this deferral.
That's correct. And I can tell you that the 1.3 million workers already working for the federal government are going to get this. The federal government has made the decision that they are going to take this and defer those payments. The president, though, has said, and White House Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow, that they will try and make this permanent, this deferral, so they will never have to be paid back. But again, that uncertainty is causing some companies to really say, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to offer this to our employees.
Yeah, let's go back to what you're talking about, how they want to make it permanent. The president doesn't have the power to make it permanent, does he? I mean,
that's
he has
correct.
to have help from Congress, and that's really tough right now.
That's correct. Yeah, they would need lawmakers in Congress to come to a deal on a bill and put that bill forward in order to make these payroll tax deferrals permanent. However, the Larry Kudlow, the White House economic advisor, is making the case that if the president or if the Republicans win both the Senate, the House, and the presidency, that would be much easier to get that deferral done, to make permanent. Also, he says at the end of this year, Kudlow saying by the end of this year, the president will sign another executive order deferring the deferral. So that means that the president will be able to continually defer this until we can get a deal, is what his argument is, with Democrats, Republicans, whoever's lawmakers that make up the Congress, in order so folks don't have to pay this back.
All right. Now, not everybody would be eligible for this, even if companies allow you to defer. You have to be making a certain amount or less, correct?
That's correct. Your biweekly total pre-tax would be $4,000, or that's $2,000 a week pre-tax, and it comes out to basically an annual salary of under $104,000. And those are the only folks who would be eligible to get this deferral.
All right. So if you make over that, even if your employer says you can, you can't.
Correct.
So what happens in January? Let's say I defer and I have a couple $1,000s extra that come in my paycheck. What happens January 1st, supposedly, unless there's more deferrals?
Assuming there's no more deferrals by the president, assuming that it's not made permanent, you would then have to pay back you would be paying your regular Social Security tax and then some portion of the deferred amount. So you would see less in your paycheck starting January 1st. It has to be paid from January through April, because starting on May 1st, there's going to be a penalty if that is not paid back, that full tax.
A penalty?
Yes.
All right. So, but again, if your company's the one who's dealing with all this, assuming, they're the ones that took the money out, and then they would be the ones that didn't take the money out and deferred it, they would be also the ones, though, that would claw it back. So you wouldn't have to actually write a check personally, right?
No, you would just not see it in your paycheck. So your weekly paycheck would be less than normal to pay the extra amount of the deferred. But here's where it gets kind of fuzzy, Dave, because what happens if you're an employee now, but on January 1st, you are no longer an employee of that particular company.
Right. You get laid off.
And this is the uncertainty, that the reason some companies aren't doing this, because there's no clear guidance from the IRS as to, yes, the company's on the hook for that money, or you as a person is on the hook and it follows you around.
What if you're unemployed in January? Then you...
Exactly.
Wow.
There's just no clear guidance going forward if that scenario comes up where you're no longer an employee.
The other thing that I know that it's not easy, especially for a large company, to implement something immediately. This was signed by the president a few weeks ago. The guidance from the IRS didn't go out to specify how to do this until last week, correct?
Yeah, Friday, actually. It went out Friday of last week.
So how quickly can they actually implement a deferral in the payroll systems?
Well, some companies, I mean, some companies have advanced software and they can just not collect that particular tax. Other companies, small businesses, for example, might not be able to pay that amount of money to get that advanced software. So it could take a little bit of time. Now, I don't think it's going to be the same kind of time that we're talking about with states trying to fix their unemployment insurance and get that extra benefits in there. It's not as archaic as that, but it could take a week or so for companies to sort of get this right.
Now, there's a lot of criticism about, what would happen to Social Security because you're defunding it initially for a few months, right?
And that's exactly right. And this is where the White House in one voice has basically said that they're going to make sure that Social Security is whole. So somehow either move money from the general fund, which is what I've heard Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin say. They can move money from the general fund into Social Security. I've also heard White House Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow say that they will absolutely make sure that Social Security is whole. This will not affect Social Security.
Now, if this payroll tax reduction sounds familiar, it's because back in 2011, President Obama signed one into law that was passed by Congress, not a deferral that had to be paid back. It expired in 2013, but it wasn't as big as this one. It cut the payroll tax from 6.2 to 4.2%, saving the average worker about $19 a week. Now, to the other part of the president's executive order mentioned earlier, it offers another round of extra unemployment assistance after the $600 a week that many Republicans thought was too much expired at the end of July. This new round is about half that.
So basically, on expanded unemployment benefits, the states would have to apply to FEMA because the money's actually coming from FEMA. It's being redirected, so it's an opt-in situation. So 41 states so far have applied and been approved for this extra unemployment benefits. Of those states, 6 of them, Arizona, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, which is giving it a full $400 extra, Texas and Tennessee are sending those extra benefits right now. Now, it's $300 additional from the federal government. Then states can choose to add on another $100 a week in extra, meaning an actual $400 a week in extra benefits. And again, I said Montana is the only state so far who's been approved and is actually sending out those extra benefits.
What about FEMA's funding? I mean, it is hurricane season.
Exactly. This is coming from the emergency relief. The administration feels like there is enough funding in FEMA to cover this. And as you see, not all of the states have applied for this, but this is just a stopgap to try and come to some agreement with Democrats going forward for some COVID relief package, the 4th relief package, which is at a stalemate right now.
Now, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin faced a lot of questions about that at a House hearing on Tuesday.
I believe a bipartisan agreement still should be reached and would provide substantial funds for schools, testing, vaccines, PPP for small businesses, continued enhanced unemployment benefits.
And the president, by a new executive order, wants to offer people who can't pay their rent further protections from evictions. It's estimated about a third of Americans have missed either a rent or a mortgage payment during this crisis.
7 months since the first case was discovered on our shores, the course of this coronavirus continues to be devastating.
So Congressman James Clyburn and his fellow Democrats want to spend a lot more than Republicans do.
It is going nowhere at this point. What's happening now is that the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, is working with Republicans in the Senate, and they're going to put forth a bill at some point this week that has $500 billion in it. And that's going to have things like testing, some money for schools to reopen. It's also going to have direct payments to Americans on the expanded unemployment benefits, among some other things. But basically just what's needed, not the extra fluff. And so it's $500 billion. They're going to try and get it passed through the Senate. Once that happens, that's a starting point, according to the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, from where they can go up to Democrats. They don't want to start where the House bill was, the HEROES Act, and come down because Democrats at this point have not been willing to come down off their number. They're saying $2.2 trillion is as much as they'll come down on that.
Yeah, well, one of the big problems is when it comes to trying to figure this out, House Democrats want to spend a lot of money on aid to state and local governments. Republicans don't want that.
Exactly. You're talking about $914 billion is what Mark Meadows says that the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wants, and she will not come off that number, is what he's saying. And that is just unacceptable because the White House is saying, hey, look, we want to know where that money's going and what that money's for. The House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, according to the White House, according to Meadows, at this moment is not saying exactly what that money is for. And this is the rub. They don't want to bail out states that have mismanaged their money, like California with the pensions that they've given just killed their budget. New York, Illinois, they don't want to bail out these states that have mismanaged their funding just because the coronavirus is around. They want to make sure that money is targeted to those actual places where it needs, like overtime for firefighters, overtime for medics, the firefighters that are EMTs, also getting police overtime to handle some of these riots and the violence.
Edward Lawrence, Fox Business, thank you for joining us.
Dave, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, subscribe and listen to the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Former federal prosecutor and 4-term U.S. Congressman from South Carolina brings you a one-of-a-kind podcast. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Jimmy Fallon.
What's on your mind?
Donald Trump famously joked during the 2016 campaign that he was so popular he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue in New York City and get away with it. Critics pointed to the joke as proof that then candidate Trump was running some kind of a cult. Well, the truth is he was then and he is now. But the star of the cult isn't Trump, it's America. And as was the case in 2016, no one in the media seems to be in on the joke but him. Here's the thing. Donald Trump has been selling maximum strength America since the moment he came down the escalator. And it's a lot more potent than any of his critics seem to realize. Yes, the guy has a weapons-grade ego, and he leads the league in wild pitches on Twitter every year. But he also has a true political superpower, and that he's far more in touch with the average voter than any of his enemies could ever dream to be. That was the lesson we were all supposed to have learned from the historic upset of Hillary Clinton. Highly paid TV analysts prioritize completely different issues than blue-collar workers do. Hence the result everyone found so shocking. While the media spent 2016 obsessing over the Trump Twitter feed, he knew voters were focused on issues that directly affected their lives, like a vow to bring back jobs and renegotiate some of those bad trade deals. Trump recognized that voters are a lot more inspired by a candidate who talks their country up, especially after 8 years of an administration that used identity politics to talk it down. Which brings us to the race we're in now. Like Hillary Clinton before him, Joe Biden is going all in on a dopey social pressure campaign with a slogan that pits Trump as the enemy in a fictitious battle for the soul of our nation. Folks, make no mistake about it. Democrats and their allies in the media have learned nothing from 2016. Rather than giving voters something to root for, they spent their entire convention giving voters someone to root against. They brought out some of the most respected and influential politicians in the world, and also John Kasich. And they doubled down on the president's character issues, despite the fact that for most voters, that horse left the barn years ago. And it's just as well, because the barn would likely get burnt down at a peaceful protest if it was anywhere near a Democrat-run city. Folks, the average American knows President Trump isn't throwing a perfect rhetorical game, which explains why after 4 nights of Orange Man bad at the DNC, Joe Biden got 0 bump in the polls. Donald Trump is a better shot at a second term than anyone realizes because he's once again going full throttle on American excellence, vowing during his acceptance speech on the White House lawn to get the country off the mat after it was knocked down by a deadly pandemic. Here's the electoral contrast in a nutshell. Unlike the Democrats, the Republicans aren't bashing America for awful parts of its history like slavery and segregation, things we've worked incredibly hard to overcome, I might add. Rather than asking voters to focus on the America we were, the president brought out black supporters like civil rights icon Clarence Henderson, who is an instrumental figure in making us the America we are, which is a place where South Carolina Senator Tim Scott's family could go from cotton to Congress in 1 generation. Senator Scott, grandson of a sharecropper, grew up to be the first African-American elected to both houses of Congress. He didn't say we have a perfect country, but at a time when the left is desperately pushing divisive terms like white privilege, he pointed out the unique American privilege everyone in this country has right now, thanks to the sacrifices of civil rights forebearers like Clarence Henderson. Tim Scott pointed out that his prosperity was attributable to the evolution of the Southern heart that allowed voters to judge him by the content of his character and not the color of his skin. But most importantly, he emphasized above all else that for all of its flaws, America is a country worth rooting for, something Donald Trump knows better than anybody. Yes, President Trump may be the ultimate showman, but the star of the show is not him. It's the greatest country in the world. And that just so happens to be the greatest inside joke ever told. Be sure to check out Fox Across America weekdays from noon to 3 with me, Jimmy Fallon, at foxnewsradio.com.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.